They beat my wife. The scream tore through the afternoon heat like a gunshot. Walter Hayes, 74 years old, legless, strapped into a wheelchair that had become his prison for 3 decades, threw his head back and roared those 4 words with everything left in his shattered body. His wife Evelyn lay crumpled on the scorching asphalt, blood pooling dark and thick beneath her silver hair, her glasses shattered into glittering fragments across the crosswalk. 3 college boys in polo shirts stood over her, laughing, their lifted black truck still idling in the intersection, chrome gleaming like a threat. Walter's gnarled hands shook as he reached for his phone, his thumb hovering over a number he swore he'd never call again. A number that connected him to ghosts, to brothers, to a past the world thought had died in a hail of bullets 30 years ago. Before we dive into what happened next, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now. This story is going to take you places you never expected, and I promise you'll want to see how far justice can reach when the right people get angry. Drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels, just like the Brotherhood that's about to shake an entire city to its foundation. Trust me, you'll want to stick around until the end. The first mistake the 3 boys made was running the red light. The second was laughing when Evelyn Hayes shouted at them. The third, the one that would cost them everything, was putting their hands on her. Walter saw it happen in fragments, like his brain couldn't process the violence fast enough. 1 second, Evelyn was beside him in the crosswalk, her hand resting on his shoulder the way it had for 47 years of marriage. The next, she was stumbling backward, her thin frame no match for the shove from the blonde kid in the driver's seat. Brandon, something Walter would learn later, son of a real estate developer who owned half the new construction, choking the life out of their neighborhood. Evelyn's head made a sound when it hit the curb. Not loud, just a sick, wet crack that seemed to silence everything else. The traffic, the distant sirens, the chatter from the coffee shop patio, all of it went dead. Just that sound repeating in Walter's skull like a record skip. Then the blood started spreading. Jesus Christ, someone whispered from the sidewalk. Awesome. Nobody moved. Phones came up instead, a dozen screens capturing Evelyn's crumpled form, her legs twisted at angles that made Walter's stomach lurch. The 3 boys stood there looking at her, not helping, not apologizing, looking. Then Brandon, tall-tanned, wearing a fraternity tank top that probably cost more than Walter's monthly disability check, started laughing. Not a nervous laugh, a genuine, entertained laugh. Dude, she went down like a sack of potatoes, he said to his friends. Did you see her face? Something in Walter's chest cracked open. Not his heart that had broken so many times, it was mostly scar tissue anyway. Something older. Something he'd buried in 1994 when the doctors told him he'd never walk again, when the club president had visited him in the hospital and told him it was time to disappear, to live quiet, to let the Brotherhood move on without their best mechanic dragging them down. Walter's hands found the wheels of his chair. He rolled forward, his stumps throbbing where his legs used to be, and he positioned himself between Evelyn and the boys. "You need to call an ambulance," Walter said. His voice came out steady, which surprised him. "You need to call one right now." Brandon looked down at him, really looked at him for the first time. Walter watched the calculation happen in the kid's eyes, disabled old man wheelchair. No legs, probably poor, definitely powerless. "Or what wheels?" Brandon said. His friends laughed. "You gonna roll over my feet?" "I'm asking you to help my wife," Walter said. "Please." "Should have kept her on a leash, old man." Brandon turned to his friends. "Come on, let's bounce before the cops show up." They started back toward their truck. That's when Walter pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so badly, it took him 3 tries to unlock the screen. The contact list was short. Evelyn, his daughter in Seattle, the VA hospital, a couple of old Army buddies who checked in on holidays, and at the very bottom added 30 years ago and never deleted, never called Dutch. Walter's thumb hovered over the name. He'd promised himself he was done with that life. Promised Evelyn, promised his daughter, promised the doctors and the parole officer and everyone else who'd helped him build something normal after the accident, after the shooting, after everything. But Evelyn was bleeding on the pavement, and nobody else was doing a damn thing about it. Walter pressed call. It rang once, twice. On the 3rd ring, a voice like gravel in a garbage disposal answered. "This number's been dead for 30 years. Who the hell is this?" "Dutch." Walter's voice cracked. "It's Iron Wrench." Silence, long enough that Walter thought the connection had dropped. Then wrench that, really you, brother. Dutch, I need. Walter's throat closed up. He looked at Evelyn at the blood still spreading at the crowd of people, the filming, and instead of helping at the three boys climbing into their truck like nothing had happened. They beat my wife, Dutch. They beat Evelyn, and they're just leaving. Where are you? Chandler and Fifth, the downtown intersection by the don't move, don't let them leave. I'm coming. The line went dead. Walter looked up. Brandon had the truck in gear. They were actually going to drive away. Just like that. Like Evelyn was a pothole they'd hit a minor inconvenience in their day. Stop, Walter shouted. His voice broke. You can't just leave. Brandon stuck his head out the window. Watch us cripple. The truck started rolling forward. Walter threw himself from his wheelchair. He hit the asphalt hard, his stump screaming in protest, and grabbed the truck's front bumper with both hands. The wheelchair clattered away behind him. People gasped. Someone yelled. But Walter held on. You're not leaving, he said through gritted teeth. Not until you face what you did. Brandon revved the engine. Get off my truck, you crazy old bastard. Make me. For a second, Walter thought the kid might actually do it, might actually hit the gas and drag him down the street. He could see it in Brandon's eyes, that moment of calculation, weighing the consequences, deciding if a disabled old man's life was worth the hassle. Then Brandon's friend in the passenger seat, a stocky kid with a buzz cut, said something Walter couldn't hear. Brandon's face went pale. He was looking past Walter now at something down the street. Walter knew what it was before he heard it. That sound, that beautiful, terrible sound he hadn't heard in 30 years. The rumble started low like thunder rolling in from the mountains. Then it grew and grew and grew until the windows in the coffee shop were rattling, until the pavement itself seemed to vibrate, until every head on the street turned toward the sound of 40 Harley-Davidson motorcycles roaring down Chandler Boulevard in perfect formation. They came like a wall, black leather and chrome patches and colors Walter recognized even from 200 yards away. The Death's Head, the red and white, Hell's Angels Arizona in bold letters across every back. Leading them was Dutch himself, 68 years old, and still built like the amateur boxer he'd been in prison back in the 70s. His gray beard whipped behind him in the wind. His eyes, even from this distance, were locked on Walter. The bikes surrounded the intersection in 30 seconds flat, every exit blocked, every escape route sealed. The roar of the engines was deafening, and then all at once they shut off. The silence was worse than the noise. Dutch dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the pavement with deliberate weight. He walked toward Walter with the kind of calm that came from a lifetime of violence barely restrained. Behind him, 39 other members formed a loose semicircle, their faces unreadable behind beards and sunglasses. Wrench, Dutch said softly. He knelt beside Walter, one hand on the old man's shoulder. Brother, I got you. Then Dutch looked at Evelyn. His jaw tightened. He turned to another member, a younger guy with full-sleeve tattoos and kind eyes. Joker, call 911. Tell them we need paramedics now. Already did, Joker said. They're 3 minutes out. Dutch nodded. Then he stood and turned to face Brandon's truck. The three boys looked like they were going to be sick. Which one touched her? Dutch asked, his voice carrying across the silent intersection. Walter pointed with a shaking hand. The driver, Brandon. Dutch walked to the driver's side window. Brandon had locked the doors, but Dutch just stood there staring at him through the glass. Not angry, not yelling, just staring. Get out of the truck, Dutch said calmly. I don't have to do anything. Brandon's voice was pitched high, scared. You can't keep us here. That's kidnapping. Son, I've done 20 years in state prison, 5 in federal. I've been shot 7 times and stabbed twice. I watched my best friend die in my arms during a bar fight in Tucson, and I held his mama at the funeral while she cried herself empty. Dutch's voice never rose above conversational. So when I tell you to get out of the truck, I want you to understand something real important. I'm not asking. I'm giving you an opportunity to do the right thing before I make you do it. Brandon's hand moved toward the shifter. Dutch saw it. Before the kid could put the truck in gear, Dutch's fist went through the driver's side window in an explosion of safety glass. Brandon screamed. His friends screamed. The crowd screamed. Dutch grabbed Brandon by the collar and dragged him through the window, opening like a rag doll. The kid hit the pavement, hard glass shards glittering in his perfect blonde hair. His friends didn't move. They sat frozen in the truck, watching through the windshield. Get them out, Dutch said to 2 other members. They complied, pulling the passenger door open and hauling both boys out onto the street with no ceremony whatsoever. All three boys were on their knees now, glass-covered and terrified, surrounded by 40 bikers who looked like they were deciding between calling the cops or handling this the old way. "Do you understand what you did?" Dutch asked Brandon. His voice was still calm, still quiet. Somehow that made it more terrifying. "Do you have even the first clue?" "It was an accident," Brandon stammered. "She got in the way. I didn't mean to. You shoved her. I want you to say it." "I didn't." Dutch knelt down, getting right in Brandon's face. "Say it." Okay, I shoved her. She was yelling at me, and I just wanted her to shut up." "Why? Because she was being crazy, getting in my face about the running the light." "Did you run the light?" Brandon hesitated. "Yeah." "So she was right. That doesn't give her the right to what? To speak to you." Dutch's voice finally had an edge, now sharp as broken glass. "To point out that you nearly killed her husband, to exist in a crosswalk that you decided wasn't important because you've got places to be." Behind them, sirens were getting closer. Walter could see the flashing lights reflecting off the storefront windows. Dutch stood up. "Here's what's going to happen now. The police are coming, the paramedics are coming, and you're going to tell them exactly what you did. No lies, no excuses, no daddy's lawyer spinning stories. You're going to own it." "Or what?" Brandon tried to sound tough. It didn't work. Dutch smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Or I make sure everyone you know sees the video." "What video?" Joker held up his phone. "Been filming since we got here, kid. Got you admitting you shoved her. Got you calling her crazy. Got you trying to run. It's already backed up to cloud storage along with—" He looked around at the crowd. "Looks like about 15 other people's recordings. Wonder what your college's administration would think. What about your dad's business partners? How long you think it takes something like this to go viral?" Brandon's face went from scared to panicked. "You can't, that's blackmail." "No, that's consequences." Dutch turned away from him, already done with the conversation. He walked back to Walter and Evelyn. The ambulance pulled up, lights blazing. Paramedics rushed out with a stretcher and equipment. Walter tried to get closer to Evelyn, but Dutch gently held him back. "Let them work, brother," Dutch said softly. "She's tough. She's going to make it." "You don't know that?" Walter's voice was hollow. "Yeah, I do, because she's married to you and nobody weak could handle that." Dutch squeezed Walter's shoulder. "Remember when you took that bullet for me, Yuma 94? Walter nodded. He remembered. The ambush outside the clubhouse. The rival gang. Dutch in the open reloading. Walter throwing himself between his president and the shooter. The white-hot punch of the bullet tearing through his spine. The end of everything. "You saved my life that day," Dutch said. "Oh, my mom. Probably saved half the club. And what did I do? I let you disappear. Let you fade away because you couldn't ride anymore. Couldn't wrench anymore. Couldn't be useful." His voice cracked. "I've regretted that every day for 30 years, Wrench. Every single day." "You visited me in the hospital," Walter said. "You told me to build a real life, to get out before the violence killed me. And you did. You built something beautiful with Evelyn. Raised a daughter, stayed clean, did everything right." Dutch watched as the paramedics loaded Evelyn onto the stretcher. "But we never stopped being brothers. And brothers don't abandon each other when some punk-ass kids decide they're untouchable." The police arrived in force, 6 cruisers, lights blazing. Officers poured out hands on weapons, clearly expecting a brawl. The sergeant in charge, a weathered woman in her 50s with stripes on her sleeve, took one look at the scene and her shoulders sagged. "Dutch," she said tiredly. "Really downtown at rush hour?" "Sergeant Pacheco." Dutch nodded respectfully. "Got a situation here." "I can see that. You want to tell me why 40 Hell's Angels are blockading my intersection?" Dutch pointed at Evelyn being loaded into the ambulance, then at Walter still sprawled on the asphalt, then at the 3 boys surrounded by bikers. "Those boys assaulted an old woman in a crosswalk, ran a red light, nearly killed her husband, then shoved her so hard she cracked her head on the curb. When the husband tried to stop them leaving the scene, they mocked him for being disabled." Sergeant Pacheco's expression hardened. She looked at the boys, then at the crowd of onlookers, many still holding up phones. Anyone get video of about 20 people, Joker said, walking over with his phone extended. Want to see mine? The sergeant watched the video in silence. Walter couldn't see her face, but he saw her jaw tighten with each passing second. When it finished, she handed the phone back to Joker. Cuff them, she said to her officers. All three. Aggravated assault leaving the scene of an accident, and let's throw in elder abuse for good measure. Brandon started protesting immediately. Do you know who my father is? He owns Chandler Properties. He'll have your badge for this. Sergeant Pacheco walked up to Brandon slowly. Son, I've been a cop in this city for 28 years. I've dealt with every flavor of rich kid thinking daddy's money makes them a bulletproof. And you want to know what I've learned? She leaned in close. It doesn't. Not when there's video, not when there's witnesses, and definitely not when you assault a 74-year-old disabled veteran's wife in the middle of downtown while he watches. She turned to Dutch. You got lucky today. If you'd touched them before we arrived, I'd have to arrest you too. Dutch held up his hands innocently. Officer, I would never. Right. She didn't believe him for a second, but she wasn't going to push it. Get your people out of here. Now, before I change my mind about obstructing traffic. Yes, ma'am. Dutch turned to his club. Mount up. The 40 bikers moved in unison, returning to their motorcycles with military precision. But none of them started their engines yet. Dutch knelt beside Walter again. Which hospital they taking her to? Chandler Regional, probably. We'll follow the ambulance. Make sure she gets there safe. Dutch helped Walter back into his wheelchair, then picked up the phone that had fallen from the old man's hand during the struggle. He looked at it for a long moment. Wrench, I know what you think. That we abandoned you after the shooting. That we forgot about you. You had to, Walter said quietly. I was useless to the club. Dead weight. No, Dutch's voice was fierce. You were never useless. You were our brother and we failed you. I failed you, but I want you to understand something. He gestured at the other members, at the 40 men who dropped everything to answer Walter's call. Every single one of these guys knows your story, knows what you did in Yuma, knows you took a bullet for your president and lost your legs doing it. You're a legend in this club, Wrench. Not a burden, a legend. Walter's eyes burned. He'd spent 30 years thinking he'd been cast aside, forgotten, written off as a cripple who couldn't contribute anymore. The idea that the club had remembered him, honored him, seemed impossible. Why didn't anyone ever tell me that? He whispered. Because I'm a stubborn old fool who thought letting you go was protecting you. Dutch stood up. But that's over now. You need us, you call, day or night. Brother for life means brother for life. The ambulance pulled away, siren wailing. As promised, the 40 Harleys formed an escort behind it, a thundering wall of chrome and loyalty rolling through the city streets. Walter watched them go, his hand clutching his phone like a lifeline. Sergeant Pacheco came over once the bikers were gone. Mr. Hayes, I need to get your statement while everything's fresh. Are you up for that? Walter nodded. He was up for it. He was up for anything now. As he gave his statement to the sergeant, answering questions about the light, the shove, the boys' mocking laughter, Walter realized something that had been buried under 30 years of bitterness and pain. He'd spent 3 decades thinking he was alone, thinking he'd been abandoned by the only brothers he'd ever really had, building a quiet life with Evelyn because that's what you did when the wild years were over. But the Brotherhood had never ended. It had just been waiting for the day he needed them again. And when that day came, when Evelyn was bleeding and the world was laughing and everything seemed hopeless, they'd come without hesitation, without question, 40 strong, for him, for her, for family. Brandon's father arrived at the police station 90 minutes later, flanked by 3 lawyers in suits that cost more than Walter's wheelchair. His name was Kenneth Chandler, and his face was already red with fury before he even made it through the doors. Where's my son? He demanded of the desk sergeant. In processing, sir. He's been charged with... I don't care what he's been charged with. Get him out here. Now. The desk sergeant, a different officer than Pacheco, looked uncomfortable. Sir, bail hasn't been set yet. He'll have to see a judge first. Do you understand who I am? I own half this city. That's nice, sir. He'll still need to see a judge. Kenneth Chandler's face went from red to purple. He turned to his lawyers. Fix this. I don't care what it costs. But before the lawyers could respond, Sergeant Pacheco emerged from the back hallway. She'd clearly been waiting for this conversation. Mr. Chandler, she said calmly, Your son assaulted an elderly woman in a crosswalk this afternoon. We have multiple videos showing the incident from different angles. We have witness statements. We have your son's own admission recorded on scene. The victim is currently in the ICU at Chandler Regional with a skull fracture and brain bleed. Kenneth went very still. Brain bleed. That's what happens when someone's head hits concrete at speed. Pacheco's voice was cold. Your son did not just push an old lady, Mr. Chandler. He potentially killed her. If she dies, those charges upgrade to manslaughter at minimum. Possibly murder too, depending on what the DA decides about intent. This is ridiculous. Kenneth's voice had lost some of its thunder. Boys make mistakes. She was probably in the way, She was in a crosswalk. With the signal, your son ran a red light, nearly hit her husband, and when she objected, he shoved her hard enough to crack her skull. Pacheco stepped closer. And before you try to make this go away with money and lawyers, I want you to know something. This case is already viral, 500,000 views in the last 2 hours. News stations are calling. The ACLU is calling. Elder rights advocates are calling. You make this disappear, and I promise you, the public backlash will destroy whatever reputation you think you've bought in this city. Kenneth's face was white now. How did it? Who posted? Everyone, tourists, locals, Hell's Angels, random people eating lunch. You can't bury 20 different videos. Mr. Chandler, you can't pay off 20 different witnesses, and you definitely can't silence the old man sitting in the hospital right now, waiting to see if his wife of 47 years is going to survive what your son did to her. Kenneth turned to his lawyers. They wouldn't meet his eyes. We'll advise cooperation, the lead lawyer said quietly. Given the circumstances, fighting this would be unwise. Unwise, Kenneth's voice was hollow. My son's entire future is on the line. So was that woman's life? Pacheco said flatly. Funny how consequences work, isn't it? At Chandler Regional Hospital, Walter sat in the ICU waiting room, surrounded by leather and chrome. Dutch had left 2 prospects outside Evelyn's room, young members tasked with the grunt work of the club to make sure nobody bothered her. The rest of the members had dispersed to their homes, jobs, and lives, but they'd all left phone numbers with Walter. Call anytime, for anything. Brother for life. The neurosurgeon came out at midnight. She was young, maybe 40, with tired eyes and blood on her scrubs. Mr. Hayes, Walter's heart stopped. She's stable. We had to drill to relieve pressure on her brain, but the bleed was contained. No permanent damage that we can detect, though we'll need to monitor her for the next 72 hours. The surgeon sat down beside him. Your wife is incredibly lucky. Another few minutes without treatment, and we'd be having a very different conversation. Walter couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears streaming down his weathered face. You can see her in a few minutes, the surgeon continued. She's sedated, won't be able to respond, but you can sit with her. Thank you, Walter managed. Thank you. After the surgeon left, Dutch sat down in the chair she'd vacated. Told you she was tough. I was so scared. Walter's voice broke. Dutch, I thought I was going to lose her. But you didn't, because you fought, because you called us, because you refused to let those punks just walk away. Dutch put a hand on Walter's shoulder. That's who you are, Wrench. That's who you've always been. Not a man who quits, not a man who fades, a fighter. I haven't felt like a fighter in 30 years. That's because you haven't had to fight. You built a peaceful life. That's not weakness, brother. That's victory. Most of us don't make it to peaceful. Dutch stood up. But when peace ended today, you didn't hesitate. You called the only people you knew would come. And we did. Just like you knew we would. Walter looked up at his old president, his old friend, the man he'd taken a bullet for 3 decades ago. Why didn't you ever visit the hospital after I got out? Why didn't you ever come see me? Dutch's face twisted with something that might have been pain. Because I thought I was protecting you. Thought keeping you away from the life would keep you safe, keep you clean. He sat back down heavily. But I was wrong. I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting myself from having to face what the club cost you. What I cost you. You didn't shoot me, Dutch. The Mongols did. No, but I put you in that position. I was careless, got caught reloading in the open, and you paid the price. Dutch's voice was raw. Every day for 30 years I've thought about that. About your legs. About Evelyn visiting you in the hospital, trying to figure out how to rebuild your life. About your daughter growing up with a man who couldn't chase her, couldn't play catch, couldn't walk her down the aisle. I made that choice, Walter said firmly. You didn't make me step in front of that bullet, Dutch. I did that because you're my brother. Because that's what brothers do. I know. And that's why I failed you by disappearing after. You made the ultimate sacrifice and I repaid you by cutting you loose. They sat in silence for a long moment, two old men confronting 3 decades of regret and misunderstanding. Finally, Dutch spoke again. Let me make it right, Wrench. Let me be the brother you deserved back then. Let the club be family again. Walter thought about Evelyn fighting for her life in the ICU because 3 rich boys thought her voice didn't matter. He thought about the crowd that filmed instead of helped. He thought about the system that would have let those boys drive away if not for Dutch and 40 loyal men showing up like thunder. He thought about family, real family, the kind that answered when you called, the kind that shut down cities to protect one of their own. Okay, Walter said quietly. Okay, Dutch smiled. Good, now let's go see your wife. They wheeled Walter into the ICU room where Evelyn lay surrounded by machines and tubes. Her head was wrapped in bandages, her face pale and bruised, but she was breathing steadily. Alive. Walter took her hand gently. It was warm, real, still here. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry I'm useless in this chair. Sorry I couldn't stop them. Stop, Dutch's voice was firm. You protected her the only way you could. You called for help. You held onto that truck until we got there. You made sure those boys couldn't escape. You did everything right, Wrench. Walter wanted to believe that. He wanted to believe he wasn't just a broken old man who'd watched his wife get hurt and couldn't do anything about it. But the image was burned into his brain. Evelyn falling, her head hitting the curb, the blood spreading, his own helplessness trapped in a chair while the woman he loved suffered. I should have been able to save her myself, he said. Why, because you're a man, because you were a biker once. Dutch shook his head. Brother strength isn't about doing everything alone. Strength is knowing when to ask for help, knowing who will answer, trusting your brothers to have your back when you can't handle it solo. He gestured at Evelyn. She's alive because you made the call, because you trusted us. That's not weakness, Wrench. That's wisdom. Walter sat with that for a while, holding Evelyn's hand, listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor. Maybe Dutch was right. Maybe strength looked different at 74 than it did at 44. Maybe surviving, adapting, and knowing when to call for backup was its own kind of courage. The door opened. A nurse stuck her head in. I'm sorry, gentlemen, but visiting hours are over. You'll need to... She saw Dutch's colors and trailed off. You know what? I didn't see anyone. Carry on. She closed the door quickly. Dutch chuckled. Some advantages never go away. You scared her, didn't you? Respect and fear looked the same from the outside. Dutch stood up. I'm going to head out, let you have time with Evelyn, but I'm leaving Joker and Reaper outside her door all night. Nobody gets in without your permission. Understood? You don't have to. Yes, I do. And I'm going to keep doing it until she's home safe. That's what family does, Wrench. Dutch headed for the door, then paused. One more thing. The club's lawyer is working on your case pro bono, making sure those boys don't wriggle out of this. Making sure Evelyn gets every penny she deserves in damages. Making sure the Chandler family understands they don't own this city's justice system. I can't afford. You're not paying. Club is handling it. You took a bullet for me. This is the least I can do. Dutch smiled. Welcome back, brother. Glad you're home. After Dutch left, Walter sat alone with his wife in the sterile quiet of the ICU. He thought about the phone call that had changed everything. About the roar of 40 Harleys storming down the boulevard. About the look on Brandon's face when he realized money couldn't save him. About family showing up when you needed them most. I'm here, Evie, Walter whispered, squeezing her hand gently. I'm not going anywhere. And neither are they. We're going to get through this, together. Evelyn's fingers twitched slightly in his grip. Walter held on tighter and waited for morning. Evelyn woke up screaming. Not the next morning like the doctors predicted. Not peacefully, with Walter holding her hand. She woke up at 3:47 in the morning, thrashing against the tubes and wires. Her eyes wild with terror, her voice raw and broken as she screamed words that didn't make sense. He's coming back. He's coming back. Walter jerked awake in the chair beside her bed. Evie, I'm here. You're safe. But she wasn't hearing him. Her hands clawed at the bandages on her head, trying to rip them off. The heart monitor started shrieking. Nurses rushed in, three of them, trying to restrain her without hurting her. Mrs. Hayes, you need to calm down. You're in the hospital. You're safe. He pushed me, and he's laughing. Evelyn's eyes found Walter's face, and for a terrible moment, she didn't recognize him. Where am I? Where's my husband? I'm right here, baby. Right here. Walter wheeled closer, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away. No, don't touch me, don't! Her voice broke into sobs, confused, terrified sobs that cut Walter deeper than any bullet ever had. The lead nurse caught Walter's eye and shook her head slightly. It's the trauma, the brain injury. She's confused. This is normal. Normal, like anything about this was normal. A doctor appeared young and efficient, already drawing up a sedative. We need to calm her down before she hurts herself. Please don't, Walter said. She just woke up. She's scared. Just give her a minute. Mr. Hayes, she's going to tear her stitches. Then I'll talk her down, please. Just give me a chance. The doctor hesitated, then nodded. 60 seconds. Walter moved his wheelchair as close to the bed as he could get. He didn't try to touch Evelyn this time. He just started talking low and steady, the way he used to when she had nightmares about his accident all those years ago. Evie, it's Walter. You're Walter. We've been married 47 years. We met at a bar in Tucson called Lucky's. You were wearing a yellow dress and you told me I look like trouble. I said you look like the cure. He kept his voice soft, rhythmic. You married me anyway, even after you found out about the club. Even after you met Dutch and the boys and realized what kind of life I was living. You stayed. Evelyn's thrashing slowed. Her eyes, still wild, started focusing on his face. You stayed through the shooting, through the surgeries, through me learning to live without legs, through me being angry and bitter and so damn broken, I didn't think I'd ever be whole again. Walter's voice cracked. You stayed, Evie. You always stayed. And I'm staying now, right here. I'm not leaving you. Evelyn's hands dropped from the bandages. Her breathing was still rapid, panicked, but she was listening. Those boys hurt you today. Yesterday, hurt you bad, but they didn't win, baby. You're alive. You're strong, and they're in jail where they belong. Jail, Evelyn's voice was small, childlike. They're really in jail. Every single one of them, and they're going to stay there. You promise? I promise. Evelyn reached out slowly, her hands shaking, and found Walter's weathered fingers. She held on tight. I was so scared, Walter. I thought I was dying. I know. I was scared too. I saw you screaming, saw you fall out of your chair. I couldn't help you. I couldn't move. You don't need to help me, Evie. You just need to heal. The doctor cleared his throat. Mrs. Hayes, I still need to give you something to help you rest. Is that okay? Evelyn looked at Walter. He nodded. It's okay, baby. I'll be right here when you wake up. She let them inject the sedative. Within seconds, her grip on Walter's hand loosened and her eyes drifted closed. But before she went under completely, she whispered something that made Walter's heart twist. Don't let him come back. Don't let him hurt us again. Never, Walter said. Never again. After the nurses left and Evelyn was sleeping peacefully, Walter sat in the dark room trying to keep himself together. His hands were shaking. His stumps ached where his legs used to be. And all he could think about was Evelyn's face when she'd woken up not recognizing him, terrified of him, begging him not to touch her. The door opened quietly. Joker stuck his head in. Everything okay in here? We heard the commotion. She woke up scared, confused. They had to sedate her. Joker came all the way in his boots, silent on the tile floor. He was younger than most of the club, maybe 35, with sleeve tattoos and a scar across his jaw from a knife fight in prison. But his eyes were kind. Want some coffee? I just made a run to the cafeteria. I'm okay. Wrench, you haven't slept in 24 hours. You need coffee. I need my wife to be okay. Joker pulled up a chair and sat down. He didn't say anything for a long minute, just sat there in the dark with Walter keeping him company. Finally, Joker spoke. My mom had a stroke 3 years ago. Brain bleed just like your wife. She woke up not knowing who I was. Called me by my dead brother's name, Asked where her husband was, even though he'd been dead for 10 years. He paused. Scared the hell out of me. Thought I'd lost her forever to the confusion. What happened? She got better. Took weeks, but her brain healed. The confusion cleared. Last I talked to her, she was back to yelling at me for not visiting enough. Joker smiled slightly. Point is, the brain's a weird thing when it gets hurt, but it can heal. Your wife's going to be okay, Wrench. She's tough, I can tell. You don't even know her. No, but I know you, and nobody weak could stay married to a Hell's Angel for 47 years. Walter almost smiled at that. Almost. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out expecting Dutch or maybe his daughter calling back finally. Instead, it was an unknown number with a local area code. He answered. Hello? Is this Walter Hayes? The voice was male, young, uncertain. Who's asking? My name is Tyler Marsh. I was at the intersection yesterday when your wife got hurt. I'm the one who filmed it. Walter's grip on the phone tightened. Okay. I just wanted to call and tell you I'm sorry for filming instead of helping, for being part of the crowd that just stood there. I've been thinking about it all day and I feel sick about it. Walter didn't know what to say to that. Tyler kept talking, words tumbling out in a rush. I told myself I was documenting it, getting evidence, but the truth is I was just scared. Scared to get involved. Scared to do anything that might put me at risk. And your wife paid the price for my cowardice. You're calling me to apologize. Yes, sir, and to tell you that I've sent the video to every news station in the state, to the ACLU, to elder rights organizations, to anyone I can think of who might care. I know it doesn't fix what happened, but I want to make sure those boys can't hide from what they did. Walter felt something shift in his chest. Thank you, that means something. I'm also starting a GoFundMe for your wife's medical bills, if that's okay with you. I know insurance doesn't cover everything, and I thought maybe the community could help. You don't have to do that. I know, but I want to. I need to do something. Please let me do this. Walter closed his eyes. Okay. Thank you, Tyler. No, sir. Thank you for being brave enough to call for help, for not giving up. You saved your wife's life yesterday by refusing to let those boys leave. That took more courage than I've ever had. After Tyler hung up, Walter sat holding the phone trying to process the conversation. A stranger feeling guilty enough to call at 4 a.m. A stranger trying to make amends for inaction. Maybe the world wasn't as cold as it had seemed yesterday in that intersection. Joker stood up. I'm going to get you that coffee, whether you want it or not. You look like you need it. Joker, can I ask you something? Anything, Wrench. Why did Dutch really come yesterday? Why did all of you drop everything and race downtown? Joker looked at him like the question was absurd. Because you called? Because your family? Because that's what the patch means. He tapped the Hells Angels colors on his vest. This isn't just a club, man. It's a brotherhood. When one of us hurts, we all hurt. When one of us needs help, we all come running. No questions, no hesitation. But I haven't been active in 30 years. So what? You took a bullet for our president. You're a legend. You think we'd forget that. You think your sacrifice just expires after a certain amount of time. Joker shook his head. Your family, Wrench. Forever family. And yesterday proved you still believe in us too. You could have called the cops. Could have called anyone, but you called Dutch. That means something. After Joker left, Walter sat with those words. Forever family. He'd thought that door was closed. Thought he'd walked away from the Brotherhood when he couldn't ride anymore, couldn't wrench anymore, couldn't be useful. But maybe family wasn't about usefulness. Maybe it was about loyalty, about showing up when it mattered most. His phone rang again. This time it was his daughter. Dad? Oh my God, Dad, I've been trying to call you for hours. What happened? The news is saying Mom's in the ICU and there were bikers and arrests and I don't understand what's going on. Sarah's voice was high and panicked. She lived in Seattle with her husband and 2 kids. She distanced herself from Walter's past years ago, uncomfortable with the club connections, eager to build a life that looked nothing like her father's wild years. Sarah, baby, calm down. Mom's okay. She's stable. Stable, Dad. They're saying she has a brain bleed. That's not okay. She's alive. That's what matters. What happened? Tell me everything. Walter told her. The intersection, the red light, the shove, the boys laughing. His phone call, Dutch and the 40 bikes, all of it. Sarah was silent for a long time after he finished. Then, "You called the Hells Angels." "I called Dutch. Dad, you promised me you were done with that life. You promised." "I know." "Then why would you drag them back into our lives?" "Because your mother was bleeding on the pavement and nobody else was doing anything." Walter's voice rose. "Because those boys were going to drive away and I couldn't stop them by myself because I needed help." And Dutch answered, "You could have called the police." "The police were 10 minutes away. Dutch was there in 5. Walter took a breath, forcing himself calm. "Sarah, I know you don't like the club. I know you've spent your whole adult life trying to be different from me. But yesterday they saved your mother's life. They made sure those boys couldn't escape. They stood guard at her hospital door, double door all night to keep her safe. So before you judge me for calling them, maybe think about where Mom would be right now if I hadn't." Sarah's voice was small when she spoke again. "Is she really going to be okay?" "I think so. The doctors say she needs time." "I'm getting on a plane. I'll be there by tonight." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. She's my mom, Dad, and you're my father. I don't care if half the Hells Angels are camped out in the waiting room. I'm coming." After Sarah hung up, Walter felt exhaustion crashing over him like a wave. He'd been running on adrenaline and fear for 24 hours straight. His body was screaming for rest. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Evelyn falling, heard that terrible crack, watched the blood spread. The door opened again. This time it was Dutch carrying a bag from a local diner. "Breakfast," Dutch announced, setting it on the rolling table. "Eggs, bacon, toast. Real food, not hospital garbage." "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway." Dutch pulled out 2 foam containers and started dividing the food. "You're no good to Evelyn if you collapse from starvation." Walter picked at the eggs without enthusiasm. Dutch ate in silence for a while, then spoke. "I called in some favors today. Had a conversation with the DA's office. They're not offering any deals to the Chandler kid or his friends. Full prosecution. They're looking at 5 to 10 years if convicted." "Good. The father's trying to paint it as an accident. Boys will be on. Youthful mistake. All that bullshit." "It wasn't an accident." "I know. And so does everyone who's seen the videos, which is half the state at this point." Dutch wiped his mouth. "There's also been some interesting developments with Kenneth Chandler's business. Turns out several of his construction projects have code violations, zoning issues. His company's being investigated for using undocumented workers and paying below minimum wage. Funny how that all came to light right after his son assaulted an old woman." Walter looked up. "You did that." "Me, I'm just a simple biker wrench. What would I know about construction codes?" Dutch's smile was cold. "But I might have mentioned to a few friends in the city inspector's office that they should take a closer look at Chandler properties. For public safety reasons, of course." "Dutch, you can't." "Can't what?" "Make sure a man who thinks his money puts him above the law learns otherwise. Can't use every tool at my disposal to protect one of my brothers." Dutch leaned forward. "That man raised a son who thinks violence is acceptable as long as you're rich enough. That kind of rot starts at the top. Kenneth Chandler needs to understand that his empire was built on sand and the tide's coming in. This is going to make things worse. He'll fight back. Let him try. He's a real estate developer wrench. I've survived prison gang wars and 40 years of law enforcement trying to destroy this club. Kenneth Chandler doesn't scare me." Walter wanted to argue, but he was too tired. And maybe Dutch was right. Maybe men like Kenneth Chandler only understood consequences when their world started crumbling around them. Dutch finished his breakfast and stood up. "I'm leaving Joker here until noon. Then Tank's coming to relieve him. After that, Reaper. You'll have someone outside this door 24/7 until Evelyn's home safe." "You don't have to do that." "I know. I'm doing it anyway." Dutch paused at the door. "Your daughter called me." "Sarah called you." "About an hour ago, wanted to know if the news reports were true. If her mother was really okay. If her father had really called the club after 30 years. Dutch's expression softened. "She's scared, Wrench. Scared for Evelyn. Scared of us coming back into your life. But mostly scared that she's been wrong about the club all these years." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That her father made a hard choice in a terrible moment. That he called the only people he knew would come without question. That loyalty doesn't have an expiration date." Dutch opened the door. She's a good kid, Wrench. Stubborn as hell, just like you. But she loves you, both of you. And she's smart enough to recognize family when she sees it, even if that family wears leather and rides Harleys. After Dutch left, Walter sat alone with Evelyn again. The sun was coming up outside the window, painting the room in pale gold light. Evelyn's face looked peaceful now, the terror from earlier erased by medication. But Walter knew it wasn't gone. The trauma was still there, buried beneath the drugs, waiting to surface again. His phone buzzed, another text message. This one from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Hayes, this is Jennifer from Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview you about yesterday's incident. Would you be available for an on-camera conversation? Walter stared at the message. Then another came through. Mr. Hayes, this is Marcus Chen from the Arizona Republic. We're running a feature story about elder abuse in the viral video of your wife's assault. Can we get a statement from you? And another. Walter, this is Melissa from Elder Rights, Arizona. We'd like to offer our support and discuss potential advocacy opportunities. They kept coming. News stations, newspapers, advocacy groups, even a producer from a national morning show asking if he'd be willing to share his story with America. Walter turned off his phone. He didn't want to be famous, didn't want to be the face of elder abuse. He just wanted Evelyn to be okay. Wanted to go home. Wanted life to return to the quiet, safe existence they'd built over 30 years. But he knew that wasn't possible anymore. Yesterday had changed everything. The moment he'd made that phone call, the moment Dutch and 40 Bikes had shut down that intersection, the moment those videos had gone viral, everything had shifted. Their quiet life was over. The question now was what would replace it. Evelyn's hand twitched in her sleep. Walter took it gently, careful of the IV lines and monitors. Her skin was warm. Her pulse was steady. She was alive. That was enough for now. The door opened a crack. A nurse peeked in, saw Walter awake, and smiled. You can go home, you know. Get some real rest. We'll call if anything changes. I'm not leaving her. The nurse nodded like she'd expected that answer. We'll bring you a better chair then. And some blankets. You planning to camp out here the whole time, she's admitted? However long it takes. Family's important, the nurse said softly. She glanced at the door where Joker stood guard outside. Even family that looks a little scary. Walter almost smiled. They're not scary once you get to know them. If you say so. The nurse checked Evelyn's vitals, made some notes on her chart, and left quietly. Walter sat holding his wife's hand as the morning light grew stronger. His back ached from sleeping in the chair. His stumps throbbed. He was exhausted down to his bones. But he wasn't leaving. Not when Evelyn had stayed by his side through the darkest years of his life. Through the shooting. Through the surgeries. Through him being so angry and broken, he'd pushed everyone away except her. She'd stayed, so he'd stay now. The phone buzzed again despite being silenced. Walter ignored it. Whatever the world wanted from him could wait. Right now, the only thing that mattered was the woman in this bed. His wife, his Evelyn. The woman who'd chosen to love a broken biker and never regretted it. I'm here, Walter whispered. I'm right here, baby, and I'm not going anywhere. Evelyn's fingers curled slightly around his still unconscious, but somehow responding to his voice. Walter held on tight and watched the sun rise over a city that would never look at him the same way again. A city that now knew what happened when you hurt a Hells Angels family. A city that had learned in the space of one terrible afternoon that loyalty was stronger than money. That brotherhood was louder than silence. That some men, even at 74 in a wheelchair with no legs, were still dangerous when you threatened the people they loved. Walter closed his eyes and finally let himself rest. The Brotherhood was standing guard. Evelyn was safe. And for the first time in 30 years, Walter Hayes felt like he wasn't facing the world alone. Walter woke to shouting in the hallway. Not medical emergency shouting, angry shouting, the kind that made nurses scatter and security guards reach for their radios. I don't care what your biker friends told you, I'm her daughter, and I have every right to see her, Sarah. Walter's eyes snapped open. He'd recognize that voice anywhere, that particular brand of righteous fury his daughter had inherited directly from him. Through the small window in the door, he could see her facing off against Joker, who stood with his arms crossed like a wall of leather and muscle. Ma'am, I have orders. Nobody goes in without Wrench's permission. Wrench, his name is Walter, and I'm his daughter. Move. Walter wheeled to the door and opened it. Joker, it's okay, let her in. Sarah pushed past Joker without a thank you and rushed to Evelyn's bedside. Her eyes went wide at the bandages, the tubes, the machines. Oh my God, Mom, oh my God. She's stable, Sarah. She's going to be okay. Stable? Sarah whirled on him. Dad, her head is wrapped like a mummy. There are machines breathing for her. That's just oxygen support. She's breathing on her own. Sarah's face crumpled. She sank into the chair beside Evelyn's bed and took her mother's hand. This is my fault. I should have visited more. Should have been here. If I'd been here, maybe this wouldn't have happened. This isn't your fault. It's those boys' fault, nobody else's. But if I'd been here, you wouldn't have had to call them. Sarah gestured vaguely toward the door where Joker had resumed his post. You wouldn't have brought the club back into your life. Sarah, look at me. Walter waited until his daughter met his eyes. The club never left my life. I left theirs. And yesterday I realized that was the biggest mistake I ever made. How can you say that? They're criminals, Dad. They deal drugs and guns, and they saved your mother's life. Sarah's mouth snapped shut. When Evelyn was bleeding on that pavement, nobody helped. Not the crowd, not the people filming, not the boys who'd hurt her. Nobody. Walter's voice was steady, but his hands shook. I called Dutch, and within 5 minutes, 40 men showed up, ready to fight for us. They blocked traffic. They stopped those boys from running. They stood guard at this door all night to make sure nobody bothered your mother. So before you tell me who they are, maybe think about who they were when we needed them. Sarah looked at Evelyn, then back at Walter. I'm scared, Dad. Scared of what this means. Scared they're going to pull you back into that world, and I'm going to lose you the way I lost you when I was a kid. You never lost me. Yes, I did. Every time you went on a run. Every time Dutch called and you dropped everything. Every time Mom cried herself to sleep wondering if you were coming home. Sarah's voice broke. I was 10 years old when you got shot, Dad. 10. And I remember Mom getting that phone call, remember her screaming, remember not understanding why my father might die because of some stupid club loyalty. Walter had never heard Sarah talk about this. She'd been so young when the shooting happened, and afterward everyone had been so focused on his recovery that nobody had asked how she was handling it. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't know you remembered. Of course I remember. It was the worst night of my life until yesterday. Sarah wiped her eyes. But I watched the video, Dad, the one everyone's sharing. I watched you fall out of your wheelchair trying to stop those boys. Watched you hold on to their truck even though they could have killed you. And I realized something. What? You're still that same man, still willing to sacrifice everything to protect the people you love. The club didn't make you that way. You just are that way. She reached across Evelyn and took Walter's hand. And maybe the club are the only people who understand that about you. Who don't try to change it or fix it or make you safe. Walter squeezed her hand, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. The door burst open. A man in an expensive suit strode in like he owned the place, followed by 2 security guards trying to stop him. Sir, you can't just barge into patient rooms. Watch me. The man was late 50s, silver hair perfectly styled, face red with anger. Kenneth Chandler, Brandon's father. You're Walter Hayes. Walter straightened in his wheelchair. I am. My son is in jail because of you, because you called a gang to assault him, and your son is in jail because he assaulted my wife. That was an accident. She got in the way. And then you had those criminals terrorize 3 innocent boys. Joker appeared in the doorway. Wrench, you want me to remove him? Not yet. Walter kept his eyes on Kenneth. Mr. Chandler, your son ran a red light. Nearly killed my wife and me in a crosswalk. When my wife objected, he shoved her so hard she cracked her skull on the curb. That's not an accident. That's assault. She was yelling at him, being aggressive. She was using her voice. He used his hands. There's a difference. Kenneth's face went redder. You're going to drop the charges. You're going to tell the DAA this was a misunderstanding, and you're going to make a public statement that those bikers threatened you into lying. Or what? Or I'll destroy you. I'll bury you in legal fees. I'll make sure you never get a dime from insurance. I'll sue you for defamation, for emotional distress, for everything I can think of until you're living on the street. Sarah stood up. Are you threatening my father? I'm promising him consequences if he doesn't do the right thing. The right thing, Sarah's voice was ice. The right thing would have been your son calling an ambulance instead of trying to flee the scene. The right thing would have been you teaching him that other people's lives matter. But you didn't do that, did you, Mr. Chandler? You taught him that money fixes everything, that consequences are for poor people. Who the hell are you? I'm an attorney, corporate law, Seattle, and I'm telling you right now that if you continue threatening my father, I'll have every legal advocacy group in the state filing complaints against you before sunset. Sarah pulled out her phone. I've already been contacted by 3 of them. They're very interested in this case, very interested in making an example of rich kids who think assault is acceptable. Kenneth's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. Then he turned back to Walter. Your wife wouldn't be in this bed if she'd just kept her mouth shut, if she'd minded her own business like a normal person. That's when Dutch walked in. He didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway, 6 feet of weathered leather and contained violence, staring at Kenneth Chandler with the kind of calm that preceded storms. You want to repeat that? Dutch's voice was soft, dangerous. Kenneth took a step back. This is a private conversation. No, this is you threatening a disabled veteran while his wife fights for her life 3 feet away. That's what this is. Dutch moved closer. He didn't touch Kenneth, didn't threaten him. Just occupied space in a way that made the smaller man shrink. And I want to make sure I heard you right. Did you just say Walter's wife wouldn't be hurt if she'd kept her mouth shut? I meant I was just saying that confrontation escalates situations, and so it's her fault your son assaulted her. No, I'm saying if she hadn't engaged with him, she was in a crosswalk. She had the signal. Your son ran a red light. She pointed that out, and he shoved her. Dutch's voice never rose, but somehow it filled the entire room. There's no version of this story where she's at fault. There's no version where your son is the victim, and there's definitely no version where you get to come in here and threaten the man whose wife your son put in a coma. She's not in a coma. She was, for 16 hours, because your son's hands were on her body when they shouldn't have been. Dutch stepped closer. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave this hospital. You're going to tell your lawyers to stand down, and you're going to accept that your son is going to prison for what he did. Like hell I am. Do you know who I am? A man who thinks money matters more than accountability. I know exactly who you are, Kenneth. I've met 100 men like you. Rich, powerful, convinced the rules don't apply to you or your family. And you know what happens to men like you. What? Eventually you push the wrong person. Eventually you hurt someone whose family doesn't play by your rules. Eventually you discover that money can't buy safety. Dutch smiled without warmth. Congratulations. You just had your eventually. Kenneth looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Dutch's eyes stopped him. He backed toward the door, trying to maintain dignity while clearly terrified. This isn't over. My lawyers. Your lawyers are very good, I'm sure, but they're fighting video evidence, witness testimony, and public opinion. They're fighting a case where your son admitted guilt on camera. They're fighting the fact that half of Arizona watched him assault an old woman and try to flee. Dutch held the door open. They're going to lose, and you're going to have to live with what your son became under your guidance. After Kenneth left, escorted by security and Joker, the room fell silent except for the beep of Evelyn's monitors. Sarah spoke first. That man is going to make trouble. Let him try. Dutch pulled up a chair. His company's already under investigation. 3 different city departments are crawling through his business records. His reputation is tanking. Half his investors are pulling out. By the time this is over, Kenneth Chandler will be lucky if he can get a contractor's license, let alone threaten anyone. You did all that, Walter asked. I made some calls, pointed some people in the right direction. The rest is just consequences catching up with a man who thought he was untouchable. Dutch looked at Sarah. You're Walter's daughter. Sarah Hayes. Well, Sarah Jennings now. Heard you got out, made something good for yourself. That's smart. Is it because right now I'm wondering if getting out was the same as abandoning my father? You built a life. That's what he wanted for you. What Evelyn wanted. Dutch gestured at Evelyn. You think they'd trade your success for having you stuck in this world they'd never forgive themselves? But maybe I should have. Should have what? Stayed local so you could watch your dad struggle every day. Reminded yourself constantly of what the club cost him. Dutch shook his head. You did exactly what you were supposed to do, kid. You lived. That's the best thing you could have done for them. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Then why do I feel so guilty? Because you love them. Because watching your mom in this bed is killing you. Because you're human. Dutch stood up. But guilt and responsibility aren't the same thing. This isn't your fault. It's Brandon Chandler's fault, and he's going to pay for it. A nurse came in, checked Evelyn's vitals, and gave Walter a sympathetic look. You've had quite the morning. Why don't I get you some fresh water? After she left, Sarah moved to sit beside Walter's wheelchair. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay. Are you going back to the club? Like really back? Walter thought about that. About Dutch showing up without hesitation. About 40 bikes thundering down the boulevard. About Joker standing guard all night. About the Brotherhood he'd thought was gone forever, proving it had never left at all. I don't know, he said finally, but I know I'm not walking away from them again. Not after what they did for us. Even if it means danger, even if it means, Sarah, I'm 74 years old. I have no legs. I live on disability. What's dangerous going to do to me that life hasn't already done? Walter reached for her hand. But Dutch and those men, they gave me something yesterday I haven't had in 30 years. They gave me power. Not physical power. I'll never have that again. But the power of knowing I'm not alone. The power of knowing that if someone hurts my family, there are consequences. Real consequences. That's vigilante justice, Dad. No, that's brotherhood. They didn't hurt those boys. They didn't break the law. They just made sure the law actually happened. Made sure those boys couldn't buy their way out of consequences. Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I watched what you did, throwing yourself out of your chair, holding on to that truck. You could have died, Dad. I know. Why did you do it? Because they hurt Evelyn. Because they were laughing. Because if I didn't do something, nobody would. That's the same reason you took that bullet 30 years ago, isn't it? Because someone needed to do something and you were the only one who could. Walter nodded slowly. I guess it is. You're never going to change, are you? Probably not. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, something she hadn't done since she was a little girl. I'm staying until Mom's better, until this is all settled. I already told my husband. He's bringing the kids down next week during their spring break. You don't have to. Yes, I do, because you're right. The club showed up when you called, but I should have been here already. I should have been close enough that you didn't have to call anyone else. She lifted her head. I'm not asking you to choose between me and them, Dad. I'm just asking you to let me be part of this. Whatever happens next. Okay, Walter said. Okay, baby. Dutch cleared his throat. I should head out. Let you two have family time. Tank's coming at 3 to take over guard duty. Dutch, wait. Walter stopped him. Thank you. For everything, for coming, for handling Kenneth, for being here. Brother, you don't thank family. You just trust they'll show up. Dutch paused at the door. Evelyn's going to wake up soon. Really wake up, not that confused, scared waking from last night. When she does, you tell her the club says welcome home. Tell her she's family, now too. Always has been, but now it's official. After Dutch left, Walter and Sarah sat in silence with Evelyn. The machines beeped. The sun moved across the floor. Nurses came and went. But mostly it was just the three of them, the family that had survived war and bullets and 30 years of struggling to find normal. Around noon, Evelyn's eyes fluttered open. This time there was no confusion, no terror. Her gaze found Walter immediately and stayed there. Hey there, beautiful, Walter said softly. Welcome back. Walter. Her voice was rough, barely a whisper. Where? Hospital. You're safe. Sarah's here. Evelyn's eyes shifted to her daughter. Baby. Sarah moved closer, tears streaming down her face. Hi, Mom. I'm here. I'm right here. What happened? Evelyn's hand moved to the bandages on her head. Why can't I remember? Walter exchanged a glance with Sarah. They talked about this, about how to tell Evelyn what had happened without traumatizing her again. There was an accident, Walter started. Some boys ran a red light and they pushed me. Evelyn's eyes widened. Oh God, Walter, they pushed me and I fell and there was blood and She started hyperventilating. Sarah grabbed the call button. Mom, you need to breathe, slow breaths. You're safe now. Where are they? Are they still out there? In jail, Walter said firmly. They're in jail, Evie. They can't hurt you anymore. A doctor rushed in, checked Evelyn's vitals, and gave her something to calm down. Within minutes, her breathing eased and her panic subsided. Mrs. Hayes, you've been through severe trauma. It's normal to feel afraid, but you're safe here. Your husband hasn't left your side. Your daughter flew in from Seattle, and apparently you have some very dedicated friends standing guard. The doctor smiled slightly. One of them is quite intimidating, built like a tank. That would be Tank, Walter said. One appropriate name. The doctor made notes on Evelyn's chart. I want to keep you for observation for another 72 hours minimum. The brain bleed was serious. We need to make sure there's no swelling, no complications. 72 hours, Evelyn looked at Walter. That's 3 days. I'll be here for all of them. Walter, you can't sleep in that chair for 3 more days. Watch me. Sarah touched her mother's arm. Mom, there's a hotel across the street. I got a room. Dad can use it when you're sleeping. I'll stay with you. Both of you need rest. Mom, Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. Let us take care of you, please. Let us do what you've done for us our whole lives. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. My baby girl, when did you get so grown up? About 30 years ago, you just didn't notice because you were too busy taking care of everyone else. They sat together, the 3 of them, as the afternoon wore on. Nurses came to check vitals. Doctors made their rounds. The neurosurgeon stopped by and declared herself cautiously optimistic about Evelyn's recovery. Around 3, Tank showed up to relieve Joker. He was aptly named 6'4", probably 280, with arms like tree trunks and a shaved head covered in tattoos. He nodded at Walter through the door window and took up position like a sentinel. Sarah stared. That's Tank. Former Marine, served with 3 tours in Iraq, got out and joined the club about 10 years ago. Walter watched Tank scan the hallway, professional and alert. Dutch says he's the most loyal member they have. He looks like he could break someone in half. He could, but he won't unless he has to. Walter turned back to Evelyn, who was dozing again. The club's not what you think, Sarah, not what the news says. Most of them are just men who want to belong to something bigger than themselves, want to be part of a family that doesn't judge them for their past. And the criminal stuff. Some of them have records. Some have done bad things. But people aren't just the worst thing they've ever done, baby. They're also the best thing. And yesterday, their best thing was showing up for us. Sarah processed that. I want to meet them. Properly. Not just as that lawyer from Seattle trying to protect her dad. As family. They'd like that. Evelyn stirred her eyes, opening slowly. Did I hear someone say family? Just me and Sarah talking, baby. Go back to sleep. No, Evelyn shifted, trying to sit up. Sarah helped adjust her pillows. I want to know what happened. All of it. No protecting me. I need to know. So Walter told her. Everything. The red light, Brandon's shove, her head hitting the curb, his scream, the phone call, the 40 bikes, Kenneth's threats, all of it. When he finished, Evelyn was crying silently. I'm sorry, Walter said. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. You did protect me. You called for help. You held on to that truck so they couldn't run. You fought for me, Walter. She reached for his hand. And those men, the club, they came for you. For us. They did. Then I want to thank them. Properly. When I get out of here, I want to meet them. I want to look them in the eye and say thank you for saving my life. Walter felt his chest tighten with emotion. They'd be honored, Evie. Good. Because after 47 years of being married to Iron Wrench, I think it's time I actually knew his brothers. The call came at 2 in the morning on Evelyn's 3rd night in the hospital. Walter's phone lit up with Dutch's number. He answered on the first ring, heart already racing. Calls at this hour never brought good news. Wrench, we got a problem. What kind of problem? Brandon Chandler made bail 2 hours ago. Judge set it at $500,000. His daddy paid it in cash. Walter's blood went cold. He's out. For now, DA's fight in it says he's a flight risk, but the judge sided with the defense. Rich kid, no priors, community ties, all that bullshit. Dutch's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Thought you should know. Walter looked at Evelyn, sleeping peacefully in the hospital bed, bandages still wrapped around her head, face still bruised. He knows where we live, Dutch. He knows our address from the police report. I know. That's why I'm calling. You're not going home until this is handled. What do you mean handled? I mean the club's putting you up in a safe house. Got a place outside Scottsdale, gated community security cameras, the works. You and Evelyn stay there until the trial. No arguments. Dutch, we can't just hide. You're not hiding, you're being smart. This kid already assaulted your wife once. His father just threatened you in the hospital. You think they're done, Dutch paused. Wrench, I've seen this before. Rich family, criminal charges, public humiliation. They get desperate. They make bad choices. I'm not taking chances with your life or Evelyn's. Walter rubbed his eyes. How long until trial? DA says 4 to 6 months. Maybe longer if the defense stalls. 6 months, Dutch. We can't live in a safe house for 6 months. Then we make it go faster. I got the club's lawyer working on expediting the trial. Got advocacy groups putting pressure on the DA's office. Got media keeping the story alive so it doesn't fade from public consciousness. Dutch's voice softened slightly. But until those boys are convicted and locked up, you're not safe at home. Neither is Evelyn. You need to accept that. Sarah stirred in the chair beside Evelyn's bed where she'd been sleeping. Dad, what's wrong? Brandon made bail, Walter said quietly. He's out. Sarah was instantly awake. What? How? His father paid. That's insane. He's a violent offender. He put Mom in the hospital. The judge didn't see it that way. Walter felt exhaustion pressing down on him like a physical weight. Dutch wants us to stay in a safe house. Good. Do it. Sarah. Dad, I watched that video 100 times. I saw how angry those boys were, how entitled. Brandon's father already came here making threats. You think they're just going to accept losing in court? Did you accept public humiliation? Sarah's voice dropped. Mom almost died. They could finish what they started if you're not careful. Walter knew she was right, hated it, but knew it. Okay, he said into the phone. Okay, Dutch, we'll take the safe house. Good. I'll have it ready by the time Evelyn's discharged. Tank and Joker will handle transport. No one follows you. No one knows where you're going. After Dutch hung up, Walter sat in the dark room listening to the machines beep and hum around Evelyn's bed. 3 nights ago, his biggest worry had been whether they'd make their doctor's appointments on time. Now he was planning to go into hiding because a rich kid wanted revenge. You should tell her, Sarah said quietly. When she wakes up, she deserves to know. I know. She's going to be scared. So am I. They sat in silence until dawn broke over the city. When Evelyn woke, Walter told her everything. Watched her face go pale. Watched her hands shake. Watched the fear bloom in her eyes. He's really out there, she whispered. Walking around free. For now, but Dutch has a plan. We're going somewhere safe until the trial. A safe house? Like criminals in witness protection. Like survivors being protected from criminals. Walter took her hand. Evie, I know this isn't what you want, but I can't risk losing you. Not again. Not when I just got you back. Evelyn closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there was steel there alongside the fear. How long? Maybe 6 months. 6 months of hiding, of being afraid, of looking over our shoulders. Yes. And the alternative is going home and hoping Brandon Chandler doesn't decide to finish what he started. That's the alternative. Evelyn squeezed Walter's hand hard. Then we hide, we survive, and we make damn sure that boy goes to prison for what he did to us. The neurosurgeon discharged Evelyn 2 days later with strict instructions about rest medication and follow-up appointments. Walter barely heard any of it. He was too busy watching the hallway, watching the parking lot through the window, watching for threats that might not come but might destroy them if they did. Dutch arrived with Tank and Joker in a black SUV with tinted windows. They loaded Evelyn into the back seat like she was precious cargo, which she was. Sarah followed in her rental car, refusing to be left behind. Where are we going? Evelyn asked as Tank pulled out of the hospital parking lot. Scottsdale, nice place. Pool, 3 bedrooms, fully stocked kitchen. You'll be comfortable. Dutch was in the passenger seat, his eyes constantly scanning mirrors and side streets. No one knows about it except the club. Property's owned by a shell company, Can't be traced back to us. How long have you had it? Bought it 6 years ago. Use it for club business sometimes. Meetings, planning, safe place to crash when things get hot. Things get hot often. Dutch smiled without humor. Often enough. They drove for 40 minutes through increasingly upscale neighborhoods until Tank turned into a gated community called Desert Heights. The guard at the gate waved them through without question. 3 more turns brought them to a sprawling ranch-style house tucked behind palm trees and desert landscaping. This is it, Tank said, pulling into the garage. Motion sensors on all entry points, cameras covering every angle, panic button in each bedroom that alerts the clubhouse directly. You hit it. We're here in 10 minutes, 15 tops. Walter helped Evelyn out of the car. She moved slowly, carefully, one hand on her bandaged head, like she was afraid it might fall off. Sarah rushed to help from the other side. Inside the house was surprisingly nice. Not luxury, but comfortable. Clean. The kind of place you could actually live in, not just hide in. Fridge is stocked, Joker said, walking through and checking windows. Pantry too. You need anything else you call. Don't go out for groceries. Don't answer the door unless you know who it is. Don't tell anyone where you are. What about my medications? Evelyn asked. I need refills in 2 weeks. Give me the prescriptions. I'll handle it. Dutch took the papers Evelyn pulled from her purse. You don't go to pharmacies. You don't go anywhere. Not until this is settled. So we're prisoners. You're protected. There's a difference. Evelyn sank onto the couch. She looked small suddenly. Fragile. Nothing like the strong woman who'd weathered 47 years with a biker and never complained. I hate this, she said quietly. I hate being afraid in my own life. Hate that some spoiled rich boy has this much power over us. He won't for long, Dutch said. Trial's scheduled for 3 months from now. DA pulled some strings, called in favors. Chandler's lawyers tried to stall, but the judge shut them down. Video evidence is too strong. Public pressure is too high. This is happening fast. 3 months. Evelyn looked at Walter. Can we really live like this for 3 months? We can do anything if we're together, Walter said. After Dutch and the others left, promising to check in daily, the 3 of them sat in the strange house trying to figure out what came next. Sarah had taken a leave of absence from her firm. Her husband was flying in next week with the kids. They'd stay in a hotel nearby, visit as often as possible. This isn't how I wanted you to meet your grandkids, Evelyn said to Walter, hiding in a safe house, dealing with all this trauma. Kids are resilient. They'll be fine. Walter didn't have an answer for that. The first week was the hardest. Every car that drove past made Evelyn flinch. Every unexpected sound sent her into panic attacks. She'd wake up screaming from nightmares about Brandon's face, about falling, about dying on hot pavement, while the world filmed and did nothing. Walter held her through it all, whispered reassurances he wasn't sure he believed, promised safety he couldn't guarantee. Sarah tried to help, brought food, told stories about the kids, showed them pictures and videos. But even she looked worn down, tired from carrying everyone else's fear on top of her own. On the 8th day, Walter's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Hayes, a woman's voice, young, scared. Who is this? My name is Ashley Brennan. I'm Brandon Chandler's ex-girlfriend. We broke up 3 months ago, but I saw the video and I need to talk to you. Walter put the phone on speaker so Evelyn and Sarah could hear. I'm listening. Brandon has a history of violence, of hurting women. He put his hands on me twice during our relationship. Once he shoved me into a wall so hard I got a concussion. But I never reported it. My parents didn't want the drama. His father paid for my medical bills and I kept quiet. Walter's grip on the phone tightened. Why are you telling me this now? Because his lawyers are trying to paint him as a good kid who made one mistake. They're saying your wife provoked him. That he's not violent, just young and scared. And that's a lie. Ashley's voice shook. He is violent. He does hurt people. And if his father keeps paying to make his problems disappear, he's going to kill someone eventually. Will you testify? Long pause. I'm scared. Kenneth Chandler is powerful. He could destroy my career before it starts. My family. But you called anyway. Because I can't live with myself if I don't. Your wife almost died. The next woman might actually die. And it'll be partly my fault for staying silent. Sarah leaned forward. Ashley, this is Sarah Hayes Walter's daughter. I'm an attorney. If you're willing to testify, I can help protect you. Get you connected with the DA. Make sure you have legal support. You do that? Yes, because you're doing the right thing, even though it's hard, even though it's scary. Ashley gave them her contact information, promised to think about it, said she'd call back in a few days with her decision. After she hung up, the three of them sat in stunned silence. If she testifies, Sarah said slowly, it changes everything, shows a pattern of violence, makes it impossible for Brandon to claim your mom's assault was a one-time accident. You think she'll actually do it? Evelyn asked. I think she's terrified, but I also think she's brave. Making that call took courage. Walter called Dutch immediately, told him about Ashley. Dutch listened without interrupting, then said, I'll have some of the guys look into the Chandler family, see if there are other victims, other women who stayed quiet because Kenneth paid them off. How many do you think there are? With families like that, could be a dozen, could be more. Dutch paused. Rich boys learn early that money fixes mistakes, but eventually the money stops working. Eventually someone stands up who can't be bought. Sounds like Ashley might be that person. 2 days later, Ashley called back. She'd decided to testify. Sarah connected her with the DA's office, who were thrilled to have evidence of prior violence. The case against Brandon got stronger overnight. But Kenneth Chandler wasn't done fighting. On the 14th day in the safe house, Tank called with urgent news. Wrench Kenneth's hired a private investigator. Guy's been asking around your old neighborhood, talking to neighbors, trying to find out where you went. Did he find anything? No, everyone's stonewalling him. Either they don't know or they're smart enough not to tell some creep in a cheap suit. Tank paused. But he's not giving up. Be ready for him to try other tactics. The tactics came faster than expected. That afternoon, a news story broke claiming Walter had gang connections, that he'd called Hell's Angels to assault innocent college students, that the viral video had been edited to make Brandon look worse than he was. The story included photos of Walter from 30 years ago, young and tough in his club colors. Photos of Dutch looking dangerous. Photos of the 40 bikes surrounding the intersection that made it look like a military operation. This is character assassination, Sarah said, reading the article on her phone. They're trying to make you look like the bad guy. Will it work? Evelyn asked. Not with the video evidence, not with witness testimony, but it might poison the jury pool, make some people question whether you're a sympathetic victim or a criminal who got what was coming to him. Walter felt anger burning hot in his chest. So we fight back, tell our story. How? Media, interviews, whatever it takes to make sure people know the truth. Sarah hesitated. Dad going public is risky. It exposes you, makes you a target. I'm already a target. At least this way I can control the narrative. Sarah made some calls. Within 2 hours, they had interview requests from 3 major news networks and a dozen local stations. Everyone wanted the old man who'd called his biker brothers to save his dying wife. Dutch wasn't happy about it. Wrench, you go on TV, Kenneth's going to know you're still in town, going to double his efforts to find you. Let him try. I'm done hiding from a bully and his spoiled kid. The interview happened 3 days later. Sarah arranged for it to be filmed at an undisclosed location with no identifying features in the background. The reporter was a woman in her 40s named Diana Martinez, who'd built her career on exposing injustice. She asked Walter to tell his story from the beginning. He did. Every detail, the red light, Evelyn's scream, Brandon's laughter, the phone call that changed everything. Some people say you called a gang, Diana said, that you weaponized criminals against 3 innocent boys. I called my brothers, men who served in the military, men who work regular jobs, men who ride motorcycles on weekends and help each other when times get hard. Walter looked directly into the camera. And I called them because my wife was bleeding and nobody else was helping. Because 3 boys were trying to run away after assaulting an old woman. Because I had no legs and no power and no way to stop them except to ask for help from people I knew would answer. What do you say to people who think you should have just called the police? The police took 10 minutes to arrive. Dutch and his brothers took 5. If I'd waited for official help, those boys would have been gone. No consequences. No justice. My wife would be just another old woman hurt by rich kids who thought they were untouchable. And now, Now those boys are facing trial. Now there's accountability. Now other victims are coming forward. One of them called me 2 weeks ago. Brandon's ex-girlfriend. He'd assaulted her too, put her in the hospital, but his father paid her off and she stayed quiet. Walter's voice hardened. That ends now. No more paying off victims. No more making violence disappear because you've got money. The interview aired that night at 6. By 7, it had 500,000 views online. By midnight, 3 million. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support flooded social media. Other women came forward with stories about Brandon, about his friends, about a culture of violence and entitlement at their college. The DA's office announced they were investigating additional charges. The college opened its own inquiry into the three boys' conduct. Sponsors pulled funding from Kenneth Chandler's business, but Kenneth wasn't backing down. If anything, Walter's interview made him angrier. On day 19, Tank called again. His voice was tense. "Wrench, we got movement. Private investigator Kenneth hired is getting aggressive. Offered $5,000 to anyone who tells him where you're staying. Anyone take it?" "Not yet, but $5,000 is serious money to people struggling. We need to be careful. Maybe we should move. Find another safe house." "Already working on it. Dutch wants you relocated by tomorrow night." But tomorrow night was too late. That evening, as the sun set over the desert, Walter noticed a car parked across the street from the safe house. Dark sedan, tinted windows, engine running. "Sarah," he said quietly, "get your mother into the back bedroom. Lock the door." "Dad, what's wrong?" "Someone's watching the house. Just do it, now." Sarah helped Evelyn up and rushed her down the hallway. Walter wheeled to the window, staying out of sight, watching the sedan. His phone was already dialing Dutch. "Someone found us," Walter said when Dutch answered. "Sedan across the street. Been sitting there for 10 minutes. I'm sending everyone. Stay inside, lock the doors. Do not engage." "Dutch, I mean it, Wrench. Do not be a hero. Let us handle this." Walter hung up and watched the sedan. The driver's door opened. A man got out. Tall, expensive suit, not the private investigator. Kenneth Chandler himself. He walked up to the house like he owned it, rang the doorbell like he was making a social call. When no one answered, he pounded on the door. "Walter Hayes, I know you're in there. We need to talk." Walter didn't move, didn't respond, just waited. Kenneth pounded harder. "You think you can destroy my family, destroy my business? I made one call, Hayes, one call, and I can make you disappear. You and your entire family." The threat hung in the air like poison. Then Walter heard it. That beautiful, terrible sound. Thunder rolling in from the desert. Motorcycles, dozens of them. They appeared like a storm. 40 bikes roaring down the quiet street, surrounding Kenneth's sedan, boxing him in. Dutch was in the lead, his face carved from stone. Kenneth spun around, suddenly realizing how badly he'd miscalculated. Dutch shut off his engine. The other bikes followed suit. The silence was deafening. "Kenneth," Dutch said calmly, "you just threatened to make a disabled veteran and his family disappear in front of approximately 20 doorbell cameras in this neighborhood, including mine." Kenneth's face went white. "I didn't mean that's not what I—" "Save it. Police are already on their way. Threatening a witness is a crime, especially when that witness is the victim in your son's assault trial." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Kenneth looked around desperately. 40 bikers stared back at him with expressions that promised he'd made the last mistake of his comfortable life. "You're just like your son," Dutch said quietly. "Think money and power mean you can hurt people without consequences. Think the rules don't apply to you, but here's what you haven't figured out yet." He leaned closer. "Some people don't scare easy. Some people have nothing left to lose. And some people have brothers who will ride through hell to protect them." The police arrived. Sergeant Pacheco got out of the lead car, took one look at the scene, and sighed deeply. "Mr. Chandler," she said, "did you just threaten Mr. Hayes?" "No, I was just trying to talk to him about dropping the charges against my son by telling him you could make his family disappear. That's not, I didn't mean it literally. Funny, my body camera recorded it. So did about 6 doorbell cameras and approximately 40 witnesses." Pacheco pulled out her handcuffs. "Kenneth Chandler, you're under arrest for witness intimidation and terroristic threatening. You have the right to remain silent." Walter watched from the window as Kenneth was handcuffed and put in the back of a police cruiser. Watched the man who'd thought he was untouchable finally face consequences. When it was over, Dutch came inside, found Walter in the living room with Sarah and Evelyn. "You okay?" Dutch asked. "Better now." "He's done. Between this and everything else we've dug up on him, Kenneth's looking at charges of his own. His business is tanking. His reputation is destroyed. He'll be lucky if he stays out of prison." Evelyn spoke up from the couch. "Will this affect Brandon's trial?" "It should help. Shows the family's pattern of thinking they're above the law. Shows where Brandon learned that violence and threats are acceptable." Dutch smiled slightly. "The DA is very happy tonight." After Dutch left, promising to post guards overnight, despite Kenneth's arrest, the three of them sat together in the living room. Exhausted, relieved. Still scared, but less so. "Is it really almost over?" Evelyn asked. "Getting there," Walter said. "Trial's in 6 weeks. After that, it's done." "And then what?" "Then we go home. Get back to our lives. Figure, what normal looks like now. Will it ever be normal again?" Walter took her hand. "I don't know, Evie, but we'll figure it out together. Same way we figured out everything else for 47 years. Sarah leaned against her mother's shoulder. "I'm proud of you both. For fighting, for not giving up, for letting people help you." "We had good teachers," Walter said, looking at his daughter. "You fought for us too. Stood up to Kenneth. Connected Ashley with the DA. You're just as much a part of this as anyone." "Then I guess we're all fighters," Sarah said. "The whole family." Outside, the desert night was quiet except for the sound of motorcycles idling. Brothers standing guard, making sure the family inside stayed safe until morning. And Walter realized something as he sat there with his wife and daughter. He'd spent 30 years thinking he was alone, that losing his legs meant losing his power, his purpose, his place in the world. But he'd been wrong. His power wasn't in his legs. It was in his loyalty, his courage, his refusal to stay silent when someone hurt the people he loved. And he'd never been alone. The Brotherhood had always been there, waiting, ready to answer when he called, just like real family always is. The trial started on a Tuesday morning in late September. Walter rolled into the courthouse flanked by Dutch and Tank with Evelyn holding his hand tight enough to hurt. Sarah walked ahead of them, briefcase in hand, looking every inch the fierce attorney she'd become. Behind them came 20 members of Hell's Angels, silent and imposing in their leather, making sure everyone knew the Hayes family wasn't alone. Brandon Chandler sat at the defense table in a suit that probably cost more than Walter's wheelchair. His hair was cut short, his face clean-shaven, every inch the respectable young man his lawyers wanted the jury to see. But when he glanced back at Walter, his eyes were cold, hateful. "Don't look at him," Evelyn whispered. "Don't give him the satisfaction." But Walter couldn't look away. This was the kid who'd put his wife in the hospital, who'd laughed while she bled, who'd mocked Walter for being disabled and helpless. The kid who was about to learn that helpless was just a word. The prosecution's opening statement was devastating. The assistant DA, a sharp woman named Patricia Morrison, walked the jury through every detail. The red light, the near miss in the crosswalk, Evelyn's objection, Brandon's shove, the sickening crack of her skull on concrete. And then Patricia said, her voice dropping, "While this 74-year-old woman lay bleeding and possibly dying, the defendant and his friends laughed. They mocked her husband for being in a wheelchair. They tried to flee the scene, and they would have succeeded if Mr. Hayes hadn't thrown himself from his wheelchair and held onto their truck with his bare hands." She let that image sink in. A disabled old man so desperate to stop his wife's attackers that he'd risked his own life. "This isn't a story about a tragic accident," Patricia continued. "This is a story about entitlement, about young men who thought their money and privilege meant they could hurt an old woman and walk away. About a father who taught his son that consequences are for other people." She pointed at Brandon. "The defendant didn't accidentally harm Mrs. Hayes. He chose violence. He chose to use his physical power against a woman who weighed maybe 110 pounds. He chose cruelty over compassion, and now he needs to face what he chose." The defense's opening statement tried to paint Brandon as a scared kid who'd panicked, who'd reacted badly to an aggressive old woman screaming at him, who'd never meant to hurt anyone. "My client is 20 years old," his lawyer said, "a college student with his whole life ahead of him. One mistake, one moment of poor judgment. Should that define him forever? Should that destroy his future? Walter wanted to scream. One mistake, Brandon had shoved Evelyn so hard she'd nearly died, had mocked Walter while Evelyn bled, had tried to run. That wasn't one mistake. That was character. The first witness was the young waitress who'd filmed everything. Her name was Jessica, and she was 19, working her way through community college. She testified clearly, describing exactly what she'd seen. The old lady was just talking, Jessica said. She wasn't yelling or being aggressive. She just said something like, "You almost hit us." And the blonde guy, the defendant, he just shoved her. Hard, like he was swatting a fly. Did Mrs. Hayes provoke him in any way? Patricia asked. No, she was calm, just pointing out that he'd run the light. That's it. What happened after she fell? Jessica's voice shook. She didn't move. There was blood spreading under her head, and the guys just stood there. The defendant was laughing, actually laughing. Objection, Brandon's lawyer jumped up. Speculation about my client's emotional state. Overruled. The witness can describe what she observed. Jessica continued. He was laughing and saying something to his friends. I couldn't hear what, but they were all smiling. Like it was funny. Brandon's face was red. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. The next witness was Tyler Marsh, the young man who'd called Walter to apologize. He described filming the incident, feeling sick about not helping watching Walter fall from his wheelchair to stop the truck. I've never seen anything like it, Tyler said. This old man with no legs throwing himself onto the pavement, holding onto a truck. He could have been killed, but he did it anyway because nobody else was stopping them. Why didn't you help? Patricia asked gently. I don't know. Fear, I guess. Fear of getting involved, of making things worse, of getting hurt myself. Tyler looked at Walter. I'm ashamed of that. I think about it every day. Walter nodded at him. Forgiveness without words. Then came the medical testimony. The neurosurgeon who'd operated on Evelyn described the skull fracture, the brain bleed, the hours of surgery required to save her life. If she'd arrived 10 minutes later, the doctor said, Mrs. Hayes would likely have died or suffered permanent brain damage. The injury was that severe. And what caused such a severe injury? Blunt force trauma to the back of the skull, consistent with striking concrete at high speed. Someone would have had to push her quite hard to generate that kind of force. The defense lawyer tried to suggest Evelyn had tripped, that Brandon had barely touched her, that her age made her fragile. The doctor shut it down. The injury pattern is consistent with being forcefully shoved, not with an accidental fall, and age has nothing to do with it. A healthy young person pushed that hard would have suffered similar injuries. Day 2 brought Ashley Brennan to the stand. She was 23, put together, visibly nervous. Sarah had spent hours preparing her for this moment. Walter watched Ashley take the oath and prayed she'd hold together. Ms. Brennan, how do you know the defendant? Patricia asked. We dated for 8 months, from January to September last year. And during that relationship, did the defendant ever become violent with you? Ashley's hands trembled. Yes, twice. Tell the jury about the first time. We were at a party. I was talking to another guy, just talking, and Brandon got jealous, pulled me outside and shoved me against a wall, told me I was embarrassing him, that I belonged to him and needed to act like it. Were you injured? Bruised ribs. Couldn't breathe right for a week. Did you report it? No, Brandon apologized, said he'd been drinking, promised it wouldn't happen again. But it did happen again. 3 months later, we were arguing about me going to grad school. He didn't want me to leave Arizona. When I said I was going anyway, he shoved me into a coffee table. I hit my head, ended up with a concussion. What happened after that? Ashley's voice dropped. His father got involved, Kenneth Chandler. He paid my hospital bills, paid for a month of hotel costs while I recovered, and he offered me $10,000 to sign an NDA and never talk about what Brandon did. Did you take the money? Yes, Ashley was crying now. I was scared, broke, and Kenneth made it clear that if I reported it, he'd destroy me, destroy my family. So I took the money and stayed quiet. Why are you testifying now? Because I saw what Brandon did to Mrs. Hayes, saw him shove her the same way he shoved me. And I realized that if I'd reported him a year ago, Mrs. Hayes might not have been hurt. She might not have almost died. Ashley looked at Evelyn. I'm so sorry. This is partly my fault. Evelyn shook her head, mouthing no, but Ashley couldn't see through her tears. The defense tried to destroy Ashley on cross-examination, suggested she was lying for attention, that she'd taken the money willingly, that she was bitter about the breakup. Ashley held firm. I'm not lying. I'm not bitter. I'm just done protecting someone who hurts people. By day 3, the defense was scrambling. Their character witnesses were weak. Teachers who said Brandon was polite in class. Fraternity brothers who claimed he was a good guy who'd made one mistake. Then Patricia called Walter to the stand. He rolled up to the witness box. The bailiff helped him transfer from his wheelchair. He sat there looking at the jury, at Brandon, at the judge who would decide his wife's attacker's fate. Patricia walked him through that day. The intersection, the red light, Evelyn's shout, Brandon's shove, the terrible moment when Evelyn hit the ground and didn't move. What went through your mind in that moment? Patricia asked. That I was losing her. That after 47 years of marriage, after surviving war and bullets and everything else, I was going to watch her die because some kid was angry she'd used her voice. Walter's voice cracked, and I couldn't do anything about it. I had no legs, no power. I couldn't chase them, couldn't stop them, couldn't protect the woman I love. So what did you do? I called the only people I knew would come. My brothers, men I'd served with in the club decades ago. Men I hadn't asked for help in 30 years because I was too proud, too scared of being a burden. Walter looked at Dutch in the gallery, but Evelyn was dying. Pride didn't matter anymore. Tell the jury about your phone call to Dutch Mercer. Walter described it, the shaking hands, the terror, Dutch's immediate response, the roar of 40 motorcycles racing to their aid. And when Mr. Mercer and his club members arrived, did they assault the defendant? No, they surrounded the truck so the boys couldn't run. They called 911. They stood guard until police arrived. They protected my wife and made sure justice could happen. They didn't hurt anyone, not a single person. The defense lawyer stood for cross-examination. He was expensive, polished, the kind of attorney who made a career defending rich kids. Mr. Hayes, isn't it true you were once a member of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang? Club, not gang, and yes. And isn't it true that the Hells Angels are a criminal organization involved in drug trafficking, weapons dealing, and violence? Objection. Patricia was on her feet. Relevance. I'm establishing the witness's credibility and connections. Overruled, but get to the point, counselor. The defense lawyer smirked. Mr. Hayes, you admit you have connections to organized crime, that you called known criminals to intimidate my client. I called my brothers to protect my dying wife. There's a difference. Is there? You had 40 bikers surround 3 college kids, trap them, terrorize them. Some might say you were the one committing assault that day. Walter felt anger burning hot. Your client shoved my wife so hard she nearly died. He laughed while she bled. He tried to run. If 40 bikers showing up to stop him from fleeing the scene scares him, good. Maybe fear will teach him something his father never did, which is that actions have consequences, that you can't hurt people and walk away just because you're rich. The lawyer tried a few more angles, but Walter didn't break. He'd survived too much to be intimidated by a suit and a law degree. When he was dismissed, Evelyn was called next. She walked slowly to the stand, still moving carefully months after the injury. The jury watched her with sympathy. This was the victim, the old woman who'd almost died for the crime of speaking up. Evelyn described the intersection, the near miss, her relief that Walter hadn't been hit. And then, Patricia prompted, I said something like, you almost hit us, or that was a red light. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't aggressive, I was just pointing it out, making sure they knew. Evelyn's voice trembled. The driver looked at me. Brandon. He looked at me like I was nothing, like I didn't matter, and then he got out of the truck and shoved me. What do you remember after that? Nothing. I don't remember falling or hitting my head. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. Evelyn wiped her eyes. But I remember his face, the contempt, like I was trash that needed to be cleared away. How has this affected your life, Mrs. Hayes? I'm afraid all the time now, afraid to cross streets, afraid of young men, afraid of loud voices. I have nightmares every night. I wake up screaming. Evelyn looked at Brandon. You took something from me that day. Not just my safety, my peace, my ability to trust the world, and I don't know if I'll ever get it back. The defense declined to cross-examine. Smart move. Nothing they could say would help their case against a 74-year-old victim still recovering from brain trauma. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Walter sat in the hallway with Evelyn, Sarah, and Dutch waiting for the verdict. Every minute felt like an hour. Every hour felt like eternity. What if they acquit him? Evelyn whispered. And they won't, Sarah said firmly. The evidence is overwhelming. But rich kids get away with things. You know they do. Not this time, Evie. Dutch leaned forward. This time the whole country is watching. This time there's video. This time there are multiple victims. He's done. The bailiff appeared. Jury's back. They filed into the courtroom. Brandon sat rigid at the defense table, his face pale. Kenneth was in the gallery out on bail himself for the witness intimidation charge, looking 10 years older than he had at the start of the trial. The jury foreman stood. In the case of the state of Arizona versus Brandon Chandler on the charge of aggravated assault, we find the defendant guilty. Evelyn gasped. Walter squeezed her hand. On the charge of attempted flight from the scene of a crime, we find the defendant guilty. Brandon's head dropped. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder. On the charge of elder abuse, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. People cheered, others cried. The judge banged her gavel, demanding order. Sentencing was set for 3 weeks later. Brandon was remanded to custody immediately. As the bailiffs led him away in handcuffs, he looked back at Walter one last time. No laughter now, no contempt, just the dawning realization that his comfortable life was over. 3 weeks later, they were back in court for sentencing. The judge was a woman in her 60s who'd spent 30 years on the bench. She'd seen every kind of criminal, every excuse, every wealthy parent trying to buy their kids freedom. She wasn't buying it. Mr. Chandler, you have been found guilty of aggravating assault, flight from a crime scene, and elder abuse. These are serious charges that could have resulted in Mrs. Hayes' death. The judge looked at Brandon over her glasses. I've read the victim impact statements. I've reviewed your history, including testimony from Ms. Brennan about prior assaults. And I've considered the arguments from both sides. She paused. The courtroom was silent. You're 20 years old, young enough that this could be dismissed as a youthful mistake. But the evidence shows a pattern of violence, of entitlement, of believing that your family's wealth puts you above consequences. The judge's voice hardened. That ends today. I hereby sentence you to 8 years in the Arizona State Prison System with the possibility of parole after 5 years pending good behavior and completion of anger management therapy. Brandon's face crumpled. His mother sitting beside Kenneth started sobbing. Kenneth stared straight ahead, stone-faced. 8 years. Not life, but enough. Enough to teach Brandon that violence had consequences. Enough to keep him away from society until he learned to be human. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Questions flew from every direction. Sarah stepped forward as the family's spokesperson. Today, justice was served, not because of money or influence, but because the evidence was clear and the jury was brave enough to hold a privileged young man accountable for his actions. My mother almost died. My father watched helplessly as she bled. But they're survivors. And thanks to this verdict, other families won't have to suffer what we suffered at the hands of Brandon Chandler. Someone shouted, "What about the Hells Angels? Did they intimidate the jury?" Dutch stepped forward. The club did exactly what family does. We showed up when we were needed. We protected two people who couldn't protect themselves. We made sure justice could happen. If that intimidates people, maybe they should examine why they're more afraid of loyalty than violence. More questions came, but Sarah waved them off. That's all we're saying today. Thank you. They made their way through the crowd to where 40 motorcycles waited. The brothers had come again one last time to see this through to the end. Dutch helped Walter into the custom sidecar he'd built, a chrome and leather throne fitted perfectly for a man with no legs but infinite dignity. Evelyn climbed in beside him, holding tight to his hand. "Ready to go home?" Dutch asked. "More than ready," Walter said. The engines roared to life, all 40 at once. A wall of sound that announced to the city that this family had won, had survived, had demanded justice and received it. They rode through Phoenix in formation escorts for a couple who had been nobody important 6 months ago. Just an old disabled vet and his wife. Invisible, powerless. Not anymore. People lined the streets, watching them pass. Some waved. Some held signs supporting Evelyn. Some just stood in respect for what these two old people had endured and overcome. When they arrived at the Hayes house, their real house, the one they'd been forced to abandon for months, the club had already been there. The lawn was mowed. The house was cleaned. The fridge was stocked. Everything ready for them to come home. Brothers take care of their own, Dutch said simply. That night, Walter and Evelyn sat on their porch watching the sunset over their neighborhood. Sarah was inside on the phone with her husband, telling him it was finally over, that they could breathe again. "Do you think we'll ever feel normal?" Evelyn asked. "I don't know what normal is anymore," Walter admitted. "But I know we're together, we're safe, and Brandon Chandler is in prison where he belongs. Your brothers saved us, the club you thought had forgotten you. They never forgot. I just stopped believing I was worth remembering." Evelyn leaned against his shoulder. "Promise me something, Walter. Promise you'll never doubt your worth again. Never think you're a burden. Never forget that you're a man who sacrificed his legs saving a friend who threw himself from a wheelchair to save me who called for help when help was needed. That's not weakness, that's strength. I promise." They sat in silence as the sky turned from gold to purple to black. Behind them, they could hear Sarah laughing on the phone, the sound of normalcy returning. 3 months later, Dutch called with news. Kenneth Chandler had been sentenced to 2 years for witness intimidation and had lost his business entirely. His company had declared bankruptcy. His reputation was destroyed. "He's done," Dutch said. "Completely done. And Brandon's already been in 2 fights in prison. Turns out when you can't use daddy's money to fix your problems, you're just another violent punk who gets handled accordingly." Walter should have felt satisfaction, victory, but mostly he just felt tired. "It's over then," he said. "It's over." But it wasn't really over, not completely, because 3 days later, Walter got a letter. It was from Brandon Chandler, handwritten, forwarded through the DA's office. Walter almost threw it away. Evelyn said she'd support whatever he decided. Sarah said to burn it unread. But Walter opened it anyway. The letter was short. "Mr. Hayes, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that I understand now what I did to your wife, to you, to my own life. Prison is teaching me things my father never did, like consequences, like humility, like what it means to be powerless. I'm sorry, those words aren't enough. They'll never be enough, but they're all I have, Brandon." Walter read it 3 times, then he showed it to Evelyn. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think he's learning what he should have learned 20 years ago." Evelyn folded the letter carefully. "Do you believe him?" "I believe prison is hard. I believe he's suffering. Whether that translates to actual change or just regret at getting caught, I don't know. Are you going to write back?" Walter thought about that, about grace and justice, about punishment and redemption, about whether people could change or whether violence was forever. "No," he said finally. "He needs to sit with what he did, needs to live with it without my absolution making it easier. Maybe in 5 years when he's up for parole, if he's actually changed, we'll talk. But not now, not yet." Evelyn nodded. "That seems right." 1 year after the assault, the Hayes family gathered at the Hells Angels clubhouse for a celebration. Not a celebration of violence or revenge, a celebration of family, of survival, of justice finally working the way it was supposed to. 40 bikers were there, Sarah's husband and kids, Tyler and Jessica, the young people who had filmed and testified, Ashley Brennan, who'd found the courage to tell her story. Dutch raised a beer. To Walter Iron Wrench Hayes, to Evelyn Hayes, to Sarah Hayes, to a family that refused to be victims, that fought back not with fists, but with truth, that showed the world what real strength looks like. Everyone raised their glasses. To the Hayes family, Walter looked around at the faces, at Dutch, who'd answered a call after 30 years of silence, at the brothers who'd dropped everything to protect him, at his daughter who'd flown across the country and stayed for months, at his wife who'd survived brain trauma and found the strength to testify against her attacker, at Tyler and Jessica learning that doing the right thing mattered even when it was hard, at Ashley who'd broken her silence and saved other women from Brandon's violence. This was family, not blood, not biology, just people who showed up when it mattered, who stood between the vulnerable and the predators, who believed that justice was worth fighting for. Walter raised his glass to Brotherhood, to loyalty, to never giving up, to proving that power isn't about money or violence or who has the most. Power is about knowing who will answer when you call for help. And I called, and you all answered, every single one of you. His voice broke. Thank you for saving my wife, for saving me, for reminding me that I was never alone, never abandoned, never forgotten. Dutch gripped his shoulder. Brother for life, Wrench. We told you that 30 years ago. We meant it then. We mean it now. We'll mean it 30 years from now. The party went late into the night, music and laughter and stories. Sarah's kids asking the bikers questions about their motorcycles and tattoos. Evelyn actually dancing with Dutch while the club cheered. And Walter sat in his wheelchair, watching it all, and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 decades. Complete. Whole. Home. Because he'd finally learned what strength really meant. Not the ability to stand on legs he'd lost in 1994. Not the power to fight his wife's attackers with fists he was too old and disabled to use. Strength was calling for help when you needed it. Trusting that help would come. Having the courage to be vulnerable in a world that punished vulnerability. Strength was throwing yourself from a wheelchair to stop a truck because the woman you loved was in danger and nothing else mattered. Strength was a daughter flying home and staying for months, even though it meant sacrificing her career. Strength was young people finding their courage to testify even when they were scared. Strength was 40 men dropping everything to answer a phone call from a brother they hadn't seen in 30 years. Strength was brotherhood that never expired, family that never gave up, love that survived bullets and blood and brain bleeds and everything else the world threw at it. That was real power. And Walter Hayes had it in abundance, not because he'd earned it or deserved it or could walk or fight or fix motorcycles anymore, but because he was loved, because he'd sacrificed for others his whole life and now others were sacrificing for him, because loyalty flowed both ways, because brotherhood meant showing up, always. As the party wound down and people started heading home, Dutch pulled Walter aside one last time. You doing okay, brother? Really okay. Better than I've been in 30 years? Good, because I need to ask you something. Dutch paused. The club could use a mechanic advisor, someone who knows bikes inside and out, someone the young guys can learn from. Doesn't require standing or heavy lifting, just knowledge and wisdom. You interested? Walter stared at him. You want me back in the club? You never left the club, Wrench. You just stopped showing up. But if you're ready to come home for real, we'd be honored to have you. Walter looked at Evelyn, who was saying goodbye to Sarah and the kids. She caught his eye and smiled. That smile that had sustained him through 47 years of marriage. The smile that said she'd support whatever he chose, whatever made him whole. Yeah, Walter said. Yeah, I'm interested. Good. Dutch held out his hand. Welcome home, brother. For real this time. They shook. Not just 2 old men remembering glory days, but 2 brothers acknowledging that some bonds never break. Some loyalty never fades. Some family is forever. 3 years later, Walter Hayes sat in the Hells Angels garage teaching a 22-year-old prospect how to rebuild a carburetor. Evelyn brought sandwiches for lunch. Sarah and the grandkids visited every few months. The nightmares had faded. The fear had eased. Life had found a new rhythm. Brandon Chandler was still in prison. Kenneth Chandler had moved to Nevada broken and humiliated. The viral video had been viewed 30 million times, a permanent record of what happened when privilege met accountability. And Walter Hayes, 77 years old, no legs disabled veteran, Iron Wrench was home. Not just in his house or his neighborhood or his city, home in his brotherhood, home in his purpose. Home in the knowledge that he mattered, that his sacrifice 30 years ago had earned him eternal loyalty. That when he'd needed his brothers most, they'd come like thunder and made sure justice prevailed. That's what family does. That's what brothers do. They show up, they fight, they protect. They never give up, no matter how long it's been, no matter how much has changed, no matter what. Brother for life means brother for life. And Walter Hayes finally believed it.